Hello.
All right. Hello, hello. We are back, Tom and Lana. We are continuing our discussion from last time. We were talking about, well, the subject was all about enlightenment, part 2. And this is the juicy part. Because in the first video, in the first live, we talked about what enlightenment is. You know, there is this concept that, like, yes, we're human beings living in this kind of physical realm, but there is more than meets the eye, and we, according to philosophical and spiritual traditions of East and West, we can transcend our limitations, our human limitations, and become more than human and unite with the divine, or become fully enlightened, there, you know, or accomplish individuation.
We're responsible for our own evolution.
Yes. Well, that's beside. Yes, that's. But yes, there is a concept that we can evolve in some kind of way, and then there is a path that we follow in order to get there. By the way, this is our secret chief, Mr. Mercury, Merkan Turkan Rinpoche. Oh, I love you. Okay, so we're gonna. So we talked a little bit about that and the concept of enlightenment or individuation from the perspective of different traditions. And this time, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start from the top. So we're gonna do like a little reverse engineering. So we're gonna say, like, we actually touched a little bit on what it looks like when one is enlightened, and we're gonna bring that back and, you know, mention that again for those of you who haven't seen the last one. And then we're gonna look at okay, if you're enlightened, like, what are the things that you need to sort of have developed to be there? So we're gonna go backwards, right? So okay, let's first talk about, so according to, we're basically, this concept, you know, is discussed in detail in Tibetan Buddhism. So we draw a lot from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but there are also some other traditions. You know, there is some concepts in Western Hermetic tradition, even in like Christian mysticism, that have very consistent ideas. Also, then there is view of science that's very consistent. Because we're talking about reality, what is real. So it doesn't matter what angle you look at it. If you're perceiving reality, you're going to see the same thing. So basically, from the perspective of so fully enlightened being is somebody who has transcended the physical form. So we have our body, obviously, that we need to operate. But there is consciousness that kind of drives this car that's only temporary. And consciousness is not physical. Just as everything that we see around us is not really physical. I mean, it is physical, right? But it's actually, when you zoom in far enough, you see that it's all just vibrations. But they come together in such a way to form these kinds of appearances.
And we discussed last time that the process of integration, illumination, the path, it generally is considered to go in stages, and that you work your way back toward this purity. That when, you know, a state of liberation can be achieved, Satori it's called, and this is a step on the way toward full enlightenment. What full enlightenment is said to look like would be omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence. This is a complete master of the universe.
And we're gonna have Master of the Universe series. Actually, we're gonna. Should we mention our school yet?
No.
Never mind. We have a big surprise coming up. But anyway, we'll wait. So okay. So So like Tom said, there are different stages on the path to enlightenment, and there are different ways. You know, there are different like saints and different kind of characters that we see, the gurus and whatnot, and they have levels of realization, right? But then these are just steps, and then there is the concept of the ultimate realization, where we're completely free. And like Tom said, the omniscience, omnipresence, and what was the last one?
Omnipotence.
Omnipotence. So let's define those terms. So
omnipresence.
You go first. Yeah.
Omniscience would be the knowledge of everything that's happening at all times, and it's easy to think that you just have an encyclopedia in your head, but the idea of omniscience is more that you know what you need to know when you need to know it, and if it's not like this cacophony in your head. It's more like intuition serves you perfectly.
Well, also it's like ability to see reality exactly, because we co-create reality. There is it's not like reality is out there and I'm here. We are one. It's just that at this stage, for example, we are limited by our physical body and by our senses and by our delusions and confusions and so forth.
And this is where omnipresence would come in, the ability to be everywhere at any time, multiple bodies if you needed to, whatever is required to serve the situation, and ideally toward the decrease in suffering of all sentient beings. And then, of course, omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence, which is the power to do anything, to create whatever is needed, to annihilate whatever is needed, to have the ability to change matter and reality in any way that is beneficial.
However, these three things are basically what defined a fully enlightened Buddha. Now, Buddha is a Buddhist term, but it's not this kind of potential is not just Buddhist, it's human. It's just that Buddhists have, they have their own terminology to talk about it, and that's why we use Buddhist terminology, but it doesn't matter if you're a Christian, it's like all these things, it's irrelevant. We all have the same potential. So, but Buddha means awakened, right? Somebody who's fully realized in this way cannot liberate other beings. In other words, they can't come in and magically turn us into enlightened beings, because we have to do that ourselves.
And if they could, they would have already.
Yeah, exactly. So what they do have, however, is skillful means. So they have capacity to understand, how to manifest for us in such a way that we can benefit from that situation. So sometimes Buddha may manifest as an enemy or as that annoying person. Why? Because when you're faced with somebody who triggers you, or who is pushing your buttons or whatnot, it basically, you're seeing your mind. So when you kind of lose your cool or when you get angry, like it's very easy to be peaceful and to be kind of, to be like, positive and all holy and like, to be nice when you're surrounded by nice people who are catering to your ego and doing everything you want them to do and say to you, right? But the moment you're faced with somebody who like gets in your face and, says things you don't want to hear, if you get angry, that just means that you haven't mastered yourself. That's not to say that the person is not,
And at every pearl in the center is a grain of sand.
And that's not to say that, there is no person out there who's doing problematic behavior. It is, and that's besides the point. The point is, why are you reacting the way you do? Because if you were a Buddha, nothing would make you angry, nothing would make you upset, it's just you'd be a master of the universe.
Similarly, we have a little piece of that universe inside of ourselves. This idea that we each hold a piece of the purity, whether that's God or Christ or the Buddha nature. There's this idea that even, especially Gnosticism, that we each hold a little piece of the same flame that returns us to the ultimate, the pure, Atman.
We are that. We're not different than that. The only thing that separates us from realizing that is our confusion and our egotism,
Definitely.
Actually. Our egotism, what it is, that we're attached to concepts, we're attached to this idea of ourselves, we're attached to our body, we think we're this body. And, when we're kind of so overly invested in this idea that this is me here and you, Tom, you're there, and like, you know, then it's like if I'm hungry and there is only one slice of whatever something, we're gonna like fight for survival, because it's like if I think that I'm gonna be destroyed if I don't eat, you know, there's like all these things that arise as a result of being attached to the body and the self. And this is basically the delusion, right? The delusion, or aka Maya illusion, that makes us think that we are these little creatures that are very delicate, but in reality we're so much more. We have this potential. And we're immortal.
That encasing that we're stuck in, that creates a duality of inside, outside, me, them. You know, this duality that becomes intrinsic to our experience. And to experience anything positive immediately implies there's something negative. What we're talking about is an awareness of both the positive and negative at the same time. That non-duality that could be that purity. Something that is greater, the integration of all those experiences at one time.
I'm gonna share really quick. I had this insight. I mean, it was on a very potent medicine, and you know, it kind of gave me this kind of notion, or a kind of a vision of like, how is it? Because like you hear these spiritual philosophies that are ancient, that talk about like everything is essentially pure, but then you see something happening that's obviously conventionally not pure, and it's vile, and it's like, how is this pure? And actually, you know, I kind of had this really like hit me like a lightning bolt, and suddenly everything became clear. It was like everything is divine mind, and because the mind is creative, and it's like mind is always creating. It's creating fantasies, it's creating worlds, right? And it's kind of like it kind of reminded me of that story of Kali, when they called Kali to kill the demons, and she got so carried away in her destructive nature that she was like, whoa, and she just like tasted blood, and she just like, whoa, she destroyed everything. And then Shiva had to dump himself in front of her to make her stop, right? Destroying. That kind of carrying away that happens, that's the quality of mind, because when mind starts to create, it's just kind of this momentum, right? So as divine mind starts to kind of engage in the creative sort of visualization, right? And all the parts kind of, it's very difficult for me to explain this because it came to me as like an insight. So I'm trying to put it into, and I think this is the first time I'm really trying to like describe it. I mean, I told Tom about it, but it kind of like branches into many different dimensions, because you know how like you have one thought that can break into many different areas, and then there is this concept of thought forms.
Tulpa.
Right? Tulpa, yeah. So like we create beings with our thoughts, right? So they kind of become autonomous. That's the concept of archetypes. It's a little bit kind of abstract, I apologize, but just real quick. So these sorts of thought forms, which we kind of are, we're archetypes in the kind of domain of divine consciousness, right? And we're kind of split off. We're part of it, but we're like split off because we're so caught up in that creative kind of process of visualization that we create these. I don't know if you guys ever role played or if you ever acted. You know, if you anybody who's ever acted knows that when you start to pretend, you know, you enter a scenario and you pretend you're entering a role and you're this character, things start to become, that role that you're playing starts to feel real for you. Mm-hmm. You know, you can really feel like you want to cry. You can feel, I mean, I did some acting, so I know this from, you know, firsthand. Like you can get really angry from this kind of invented scenario because you're working yourself up to believe that this is true. So this is like all theatrics. So when we do this, all of us human beings are like thought forms that are wrapped up in their own visionary experience.
And that goes all the way down to our identities. You know, we've created this projection and this character of the me that does do these things and doesn't do those things, that likes this and doesn't like that. But, you know, honestly, if I sit down and eat mushrooms, which I don't normally like to eat, the experience isn't
he's
that
not.
awful.
He's not talking about magic mushrooms. He's talking about just mushrooms.
Just food. Yeah. But you know, the identity of Tom that doesn't like mushrooms. So what? If I eat it and taste it, it's not killing me. It's not hurting me. But I have this identity pattern that says, "Oh, I don't like these," and it makes the experience worse. But if I can dilate that projection, if I can pull back from it and just be present in the moment, I can actually experience something I've never or have not frequently experienced. And so these thought forms, these projections that we create, are almost like shorthand. They're easy places to go that allow us to navigate through situations in our lives with a kind of formula that protects us, that we know will get us to goals that we want. But those thought forms, those projections, are just as limiting as they are constructive.
So this, you know, so just to go back to my point, because I was, you know, how is it that divine things can result in these things? This is exactly how. It's like it all, you know, the divine mind springs into this kind of creative sort of thing. The archetypes spring forth, creating their own stuff. You know, if we create thought forms, they will, you know, we can sort of, actually we'll talk about that a little later because I don't want to branch too much into, but we can, then everything that appears to us feels real, and then there is this concept of like, I'm here, this is the enemy, this is, and then the conflict happens, and then the wars, and then but in reality, it's all like a fantasy of the divine mind. And eventually, we're going to wake up and we're going to come back and be like, oh, you know, this is all just... so that's... And actually, I also want to mention that this is like a little bit... I know we were supposed to talk about light bodies, and we're gonna get there real quick. But I did want to mention is when we're on the spiritual path and we're really burdened by horrible things that we see, you know, it's hard, right? And it's confusing because like in Buddhism, like they teach you to be very compassionate and to build capacity for altruism. But then when you see so much suffering, you can't deal with that, right? It's like so hard. But what happens when we're on the spiritual path, what's supposed to happen is that realizations start to come and we start to be more cognizant of the fact how things are kind of illusory. And yes, beings are suffering, but also there is a concept of karma, you know, and karma, because these philosophies talk about, you know, this is just one life, but we keep recycling, right? So every lifetime is like a lesson, and all the horrible things we experience are like lessons, they're purifications. And there will come time when we're all, you know, individually gonna go through our process and finish. And when we see people doing horrible things out there, instead of hating them and saying like, oh, you're destroying my world, like, you know, you're creating so much, understanding that like everybody has their own timing and process. Everybody will get to the point, you know, we've also at some point made mistakes and done horrible things, you know, in one of our lifetimes, right? And we still are. So that's just, I wanted to just kind of quickly give a little context for that.
And just to add to that, I think, you know, in Buddhism at least, we talk about the collection of wisdom. And this is kind of building the patterns, building the habits that see reality more clearly. Mm-hmm. And we are working in a process almost like dilation, that we're not so tight, we're loosening, we're actually starting to see reality more, it becomes more and more habitual. And that collection of wisdom is our ability to see through the projections that we create. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of what we're talking about, is developing this astral body, this light body, this etheric body, the Sambhogakaya in Tibetan, in Buddhism, it's Sanskrit actually. We're talking about becoming more and more clear and more able to touch that little piece inside of ourselves.
Yeah, it's like anything you give attention to, it grows. If you give attention to your afflictive nature, so like if you visit anger often, if you kind of engage in hateful thoughts and, create egregores that are like based in hatred, you're going to be more of that. If you focus more on developing love, compassion, if you pay attention more to your subtle body and your subtle energy, that stuff, you're going to start to become more cognizant of that. And that's why we have a lot of practices, in not just in Tibetan Buddhism, Western Hermetic tradition, and like really all across the board that kind of deal with that, kind of refine our capacity to feel our subtle body and to purify it. And there's this concept, like we all know about chakras, right? But chakras, people talk about them as energy centers. They're actually knotted, like energy knots. And I want to talk real quick about Tibetan yoga. Specifically, there is a book by Dr. Nida that explains this. Do you want to explain real quick what tumo is? Like, it's a practice of working, with the subtle body, right? So.
Yes, in this practice, we visualize a central channel. This is, what the chakras usually are described as lining up on. It's what the Kundalini energy would follow up from the spine, the base of the spine up to the crown. Tumo is a type of practice that is done in completion stage yoga, which is a very advanced form of Tantra. In Buddhism, it's also present in Hindu practice. And in Taoism, there's quite a bit of it. But the physical process, actually, we have some different winds that we are said to flow through our body.
Which are
electricity, energy.
Wind is like it's just another word for prana.
Prana is another
different
name
types
for
of
it.
prana.
And we can even think of it as, a circuitry in our bodies and minds that have specific functions. So there's something called the downward voiding wind. This is a particular set of processes and energies that help us purify, go to the bathroom, that move our digestive systems down. There's also other energies that move upward, that cause, intellectual stimulation, winds that may flow from the heart and stimulate joy or feelings of bliss. So in Tumo, we actually take control of these and use from the bottom and top, we kind of pinch a ball of energy or a little flame right at the navel. And we hold our breaths and we hold our energies, and we allow that flame to develop. And what you do with that energy from there, it remains to be seen. Often it's used to basically melt a kind of bliss at the top of the head.
Also, so what I want to the reason why I brought up Tumo is because, as Dr. Nida explains in his book, which I can share later in the comments, is that the basis of our physical and mental ailments or well-being is based in the light body. So basically, Tumo. Or as Lama Yasha calls it, bliss of inner fire. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the name of the book, Bliss of Inner Fire. But that's inner fire. It's like energetic fire, right? That's used to burn the obscurations, and to as you move the fire up the central channel, it unknots these energetic knots called chakras. And as you unknot each one, it releases kind of it creates capacity for it removes delusions or ignorance that's related to that center, so that you start to become more cognizant and aware of aspects of reality that are blocked with that confusion.
And psychologically, this could be like unloosening complexes and the energy required to bind them. Mm-hmm. You liberate that.
Mm-hmm. Right, complexes and archetypes. Now, the interesting thing we could mention here, which I don't know if it's going to branch out too much, is that there is this concept of the deities living in the body. That's too much.
It's a bit
too out there.
But
that's that's really interesting too. But there are it just basically says
you can fine tune this and work with each little detail. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean there are wisdom centers that when they are touched energetically, they release some kind of wisdom, and the reason why is because we are inherently made out of clear light, wisdom, awareness. It's just a matter of liberating one by one little aspects of that as we're waking up. And, so for instance, like if we're feeling depressed, this is just the case, so just stepping back, speaking of ailments, you can treat your depression by moving your body, right? You can treat your depression by doing certain mental exercises, or you can do it by working with your prana, with your breath, right? And working with tumo, or there are many different practices that work with the light body, but like pranayama is one of them. Then there are different types of pranayama. Then there are sound pranayamas where you use sound. With the sound vibration you alter the energy in the body. If you live in New York City, you need to see Dharma Mitra, who is very old. He will teach you how to do these things. He has a class on psychic development and different types of pranayamas. He'll teach you all these things. He's a gem in New York City right now. It's unbelievable that he's completely pure. I've known him for a long time. So basically any ailment, physical or mental, you can completely fix with prana. And actually Shivananda says in his book that because everything is made out of energy and prana, you can reach enlightenment just by practicing pranayama. Which when I heard that, I was like, at one point I was doing a lot of pranayama, because when I heard that I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Because, again, you're working directly with the building blocks of your body-mind reality, of the whole universe.
So one way to understand this, I think, and make it a little more logical, to use an example, a whirlpool. You see this shape in the water. Now, the water itself is moving through this shape. The water doesn't hold this shape of a spiral. Things are moving through it. However, that shape still stays and it maintains. So this is an interesting way to think of the astral body or the etheric body. This is a shape that physical matter is taking on. Our astral bodies are creating the pattern that our physical bodies are able then to fall into and maintain. Part of the evolutionary process of a spiritual path in this context is that we are becoming more and more clear about that astral body, being able to purify that energy pattern, and that our matter will fit into that pattern more efficiently without problems. This is how illnesses and things can be passed through. This also allows us to become more and more in tune with the higher self. And this is what we're talking about. Gaining liberation is getting a big taste of who we have the potential to be. Enlightenment is becoming that pure potential without any coloring, without any manifestation yet. And this is almost like Taoism, where we're talking about the unmanifest. You see both the black and the white at the same time. That's the pure, Buddhahood in some way.
Let's talk. We said we're going to keep this short, but it's only been a half hour. It's just very hard, Let's talk about light body. So again, when you're enlightened, and this sounds so magical, but when you look at science of things, it's actually not. I mean, it's out there because we're so comfortable in the world of the material things. In the same way, when you study physics and quantum physics, everything is bizarre. It's magical, right? But that's reality. Magical. That's what it is. You can't deny science, right? Back in the day, it was that's just superstition and this and that. But now we have proof, So it's now we're bringing science and spirituality together, and you see there's a lot going on there that's in common, right? So from the place, so we're gonna talk about Tripakaya or Trikaya.
Trikaya.
What is it? Trikaya. So real quick, in Buddhism, before you can become enlightened, you have to develop 3 bodies. We're going to start with the highest body, which is Dharmakaya, which is the true form of somebody who's a Buddha. And now that's a trick question. What's the true form of a fully enlightened Buddha, or of you? What's your true form?
That's the answer.
There is no true form, because it's just form. It's beyond form,
It's
right? It's just
potential.
energy.
It's the unmanifest.
Yeah.
You know, it is that which integrates everything all at once.
It's like consciousness. Consciousness is invisible. You know, you can perceive things, but you don't have. It's like right now, our bodies, we have eyes to see, but like, for example, if you go in a jungle and you do ayahuasca in pitch darkness, you're gonna see insane things, but you're not gonna see them with your eyes. You're gonna see them with your inner eye, right? So, you don't actually need physical body to perceive things. Perception happens on the level of consciousness.
And this is the dream body, the astral body, you know.
So that's called the Dharmakaya, the highest body. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to talk about
Go
it?
ahead.
Or we can. Okay. So Dharmakaya, that's like fully enlightened Buddha, right? No form. And then from there, did you want to say anything?
I'll just say, in Buddhism, the Dharmakaya can't be illustrated. It is something that contains everything. So sometimes, just to elaborate the point or carry it forward, a symbol, like a single letter, a vowel, may be used that shows kind of the seed of what this Buddha could be. Sometimes a couple is used. They're called Vajradhara. It's a tantric union. This symbol talks about the place of non-duality, because it's both male and female joined.
But this is enjoyment body, but
this is an enjoyment form. But Vajradhara can be used to explain the Dharmakaya.
Well, explain to them what's Vajradhara instead of
Vajradhara is this image.
Okay, no, but Vajradhara is the ultimate Guru Buddha. What?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the pure Buddha mind.
Okay.
It's the Buddha nature that's within us all. It's the unmanifest. It's this non-dual state.
Non-dual state. Okay. So from here, going down, so we're doing reverse engineering, right? From enlightenment down to the physical. From here, we have what's called Sambhogakaya, which is the way Buddhas, angels, and so forth manifest for us. No, not for us, sorry. That's the way in which they manifest on the astral level. And this form usually is used for teaching, really. Like, they don't have a need to manifest in this way. They're doing this for us. So this is the form that can be, it's called enjoyment body, Sambhogakaya, and it's the form that you see basically in paintings. So this would be enjoyment body, for example. Even though it looks human, this in particular is enjoyment body. The green Tara, you don't have green people, right? And when you visualize Buddhas in Sambhogakaya, you visualize them as if they're made out of light. Is the rainbow body...
Here, I can think.
Then you have like medicine Buddha, right? That's also enjoyment body. All of these are enjoyment bodies. Because usually, Tara has like, she's portrayed as having...
This is the rainbow body of Padmasambhava.
So usually enjoyment body, they're portrayed, like I said...
Fantastical, surreal almost.
They're like idealized. They're beautiful forms. They're supposed to inspire us and make us like, whoa. Like, they look kind of holy and magnificent. And, they'll often have like eyes in their hands, which all of these things like earrings and crowns and things, they're not there because they're materialistic. They're there because they're symbolizing something. So like ornaments in ears and the crown, they symbolize their attainments.
Or they might even be anthropomorphic, with animal heads, or wings, or
like
these
angels.
Surreal kind of Egyptian gods almost,
And they'll have, they'll be portrayed as having like eyes in their hands, or they'll have many hands. I keep dropping things. They'll have like Avalokiteshvara has 1,000 hands and they all have eyes. And why is that? Because Avalokiteshvara is the ultimate compassion. And Avalokiteshvara has capacity to see everybody and all of their suffering and be kind of there for them, right? So also you have, in the Western tradition, we have angels. You know, you could say this is a Sambhogakaya of an angel, you know, this kind of winged being. And of course, in the Bible, they're described as these crazy wheels and so forth. That's also Sambhogakaya.
But these are kind of the surreal dream bodies that a pure energy, kind of a vessel that they might take in order to make actions happen, but
and
not
teach.
in a physical, and teach, but not in a physical material way that, you know, we're talking about matter, that this is ghost energy, or, you know, the visions and these kind of harder to pin down energies. Higher beings supposedly can see them.
See them, yeah.
They can interact. They can receive teachings from them. You know.
So like bodhisattvas. So the bodhisattvas are people who develop bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is this kind of transcendence of ego, really, and the capacity for kind of unlimited compassion for all beings. This is why I always hammer compassion. I'm always, you know, it's like if you can't love someone and if you can't help someone, at least don't hurt them. You know, start where you are. Like we can't, sometimes it's really hard to have compassion, right? But it's like we want to get there. We want to like get into a habit of developing this attitude of having capacity to wish well to somebody, even they're like sociopathic or crazy or whatever. You know, that's not to say that you agree with what they're doing, but it's kind of like if a mother has a child who's like a murderer, or she will still love the child because it's her child. She will know he did wrong, and she will be, you know, heartbroken for the harm he's committing, but she will love him, and it will. In the same way, you know, we can also understand that like people who do harmful things, they're just so deeply wrapped in confusion, number one, and number two, they will suffer karmically for anything that they do. You know, and also people manifesting in this way, it's like causes and conditions. Like I mean, it's all karmic, right? But like you have people who, like a lot of the serial killers, have themselves experienced horrible abuse, you know, and that contributed to them. But of course, them having the abuse was their karmic result from the past. So basically, anyway, so we're just going into, it's very hard, like it all branches into many kind of layers. So any practitioner who's pure, like you and I and Tom and anybody, can become a kind of a person who can perceive the enjoyment body of the Buddhas. If we become pure and if we like purify our, you know, and we become more kind of grounded in our subtle body, we start to see these things, right?
And by the same token, you know, it's said that basically they're all right there right now, and it's just a matter of us removing the veils from our eyes to know that they're there.
Yeah.
So like, you know, this idea that we have an angel on our shoulder, you know, that our guardian angel that's watching over us, you know, yes, that is a good way to describe some of what we're talking about. You know?
In Tantra, you know, a lot of people reduce Tantra to sex, which is very sad. It's very sad. Tantra is, you know, it's about alchemy. It's about transmutation. It's transforming this like gross level body and ignorance and like into light body, right? And we do that by by kind of growing awareness and untangling confusion in our subtle body and stuff like that. So there was something else I was gonna say about so in Vajrayana or Tantra, we learn techniques to get in touch with our enjoyment body and to develop it. Like that's why Tantra is a two-edged sword, because on one hand, Tantra is the quickest path to enlightenment. Why? Because you over-identify with your subtle body. But you don't do that from the place of like ego, you know, you don't do that. You do it from the place of compassion and love and understanding of interdependence and understanding that reality is relative. What is it relative on? It's relative upon how you think and how you behave. You will see in the world things that reflect who you are in your ego and your shadow. And it's a tricky thing because, like, even if you're a nice person, you will see bad things. Why? Because we have a lot of confusion and a lot of, like, self-protective, kind of egotistical things happening in our unconscious, which totally, kind of drives things for us. A lot of our behaviors and perceptions come from our unconscious. And that's why, Jung talks about individuation, which is his term for enlightenment. It happens when you turn unconscious material into conscious. Because then when you bring it out and you see it, then you can change it. Otherwise, you're just like a robot. You're like pulled by your self-protective animal impulse. And it's okay. We all have this.
So the nirmanakaya, the form body,
is this. That's Buddha as the monk who manifested Buddha. Before he was a Buddha, he was a person, and he was a human being, like all of us. And but he in reality, this is like the thing. It's like there is a story of, like, Buddha was born and he had this life and he sat under a tree and he became enlightened. But I've heard this concept also that, like, he really just manifested. He was already enlightened, but he manifested in our world in this human form and went through the process to kind of show us how to do it. So, like, his birth was already kind of miraculous. See, in the same way as Jesus, right? Jesus came from, like, the virgin, it's like there are all these, like, miraculous stories. I mean, anyway, I'm hijacking the conversation. I'll let Tom talk about it further.
Well, the Buddha, supposedly manifested as a real person 2,500 years ago, roughly, in northern India and Nepal. This area was defined differently at the time. But this bodily form that all the great masters had to have taken in order to be part of the world that we participate in can be seen from both sides. That this pure energy manifested itself like Christ, the Son of God, in order to show us a way and to help redeem us. Or it's the person like the Buddha who started just like you or me and worked their way back to that purity. So, we have these two different examples, but they're both really important. And when we're talking about the body of the Buddha, of course, there's relics, and people say this is his tooth.
They may not know what relics are. You have to.
Relics would be pieces of the body, pieces of things that someone touched or that are considered holy. And this is common throughout most religions. The splinters
like
of the bones, cross that Jesus was crucified upon, that would be a relic. The bones of saints, these things.
Specifically in Tibetan Buddhism, when lamas pass away, they leave these little crystals and things, and sometimes they kind of put them together, and they travel around the world. Like they kind of, the exhibit travels around the world, and you can see the actual relic of, say, Padmasambhava, who was, according to Nyingma school, he was the second Buddha, right?
Right.
Also, I want to mention really quick, we see these images. Why Tantra confuses people? First of all, the only way to practice tantric teachings is to get initiated by a qualified master and to get guidance in practices and to study the teachings, and that's basically, otherwise, I'm sorry, but you're not practicing. You can't just pick up a book and be like, I'm practicing Tantra. It doesn't work like that. There are preliminaries. You have to understand the whole concept of, like, what is reality and how reality is relative, and how, there is this quick story. A Buddha, a human, and a hungry ghost, which is like a lesser realm of being, are sitting together at the table. And they're all looking at the one and same glass of liquid. Okay? Buddha sees a glass of divine nectar. Human sees a glass of water, and hungry ghost sees a glass of blood and pus. Now, of course, in a materialistic view, that makes no sense, because it's like, if it's one and the same thing, how can it be three different things? Well, it's because your state will make you see things according to who you are, what you are. And that will be real for you. So for a hungry ghost, this is really blood and pus. It's certainly not bliss. And, you know, so this is how, you know, in this concept that like samsara and nirvana are not two different places. They're both here and now. You know, samsara is like the cyclic existence of suffering, which we humans live in. And then nirvana is like the kind of higher state of bliss, right? So they're all happening at the same time. It's just that like my condition and my mental state and my evolutionary state forces me to see things as pure or impure. You know?
It's the reality tunnel, as Robert Anton Wilson would call it.
And so I was just going to say, so when people see these kinds of things, now this has different elements. You know, we're going to get into Tantra at some point. But just really quick, I want to touch. These represent, on one hand, this is actually, can represent polarities within ourselves united into oneness. So like our opposites coming together, right? And that's what yoga is about. Yoga means union. It means to yoke. To yoke what? To yoke the opposites within ourselves, the dual aspects of our nature into oneness, right?
Integration.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily about these two people, you know, having indulgent sex. And it's like, oh, that's holy. Let's just have sex. You know, if it's true that like sex that sex will make you free and enlightened, we would all be enlightened. Actually, the biggest sex maniacs would be most enlightened. And that's like nonsense, obviously. Furthermore, the Dalai Lama is a tantric master. And he's a monk, meaning like he doesn't have sex. So like how is that possible? How can be a tantric master? You know, it's because tantra is not about sex. And what it is about is transmuting sexual energy and using it for something else. It's not using it to get yourself to reach orgasm and to have your little head or your little thing like, it's not to make that part feel good. No, it's to go beyond that. It's to go beyond that fixation on pleasure. So Tantra is about transcending desire, actually. You know, not being like, right now, we're like running after desire. We're like, I want all good things. I want good food. I want nice body. I want all the compliments. I want all the nice things. And then we have the list of things we don't want. Like, I don't want war. I don't want insults. I don't want, right? But it's like, the thing, for as long as we chase after this one thing and we try to avoid this other thing, we're just trapped in duality and we're not moving anywhere. So that's why you'll see in a lot of the tantric imagery and things, you see things that are very kind of intense, you know, like well, actually you want to mention like how some deities like they wear really kind of skulls and chopping body parts, like anyway,
you just mentioned it. Yes, the wrathful visions of these things versus these
enjoyment body in this wrathful form. Yeah,
right. We have to work through these really blissful states as well as these really horrible, aggressive, and desirous and ignorant states in order to integrate them and to become bigger than them, but also utilize them. And this is where we're returning to that non-dual state that isn't just stuck in a particular pattern, that isn't stuck in a routine or a circuit, that is slowly moving to being entirely present in the moment and entirely capable with all of the energy the universe has to provide. And through that, we have to harness these wild beasts within ourselves.
Yeah, because it's actually ultimately all appearances are made from one and the same thing. So, you know, we're the more we're primed to run and be attached to the positive, and the more we prime ourselves to run away from what seems to be like something we don't like, the more we strengthen the world, the perception of duality, the kind of interpretation of reality in that kind of way. So like you'll see a lot of the tantric practitioners will, you know, they'll go into like graveyards and they'll practice, you know, they'll go into impure places on purpose and train to see those places as divine.
Right.
because you're deprogramming. Because right now we're like brainwashed in a samsaric way, in a delusional way, right? But and clearly running after pleasure and running away from pain is not working out for us, because look at the world. Like, that's not, it's like we have to transform things. So anyway, I think, did we kind of exhaust it?
Yeah. I think we've got more to talk about, and we'll be back with that soon.
Sorry, I feel I got on a tangent with this last part, but
it's exciting.
It's one thing leads to another, and you're just like, how do you stop? Like, we have passion for these things. Mercury, you want to say goodbye to our friends? Oh, let's see really quick if we had any questions. I'm sorry, I never look at the... okay, all right. No, it's just hello. I have been trying to manifest my long-term dream, but still not coming. Does masturbation affect manifestation? Masturbation, you're dispersing energy. I mean, there is this... in sex magic, you have this concept of like... kind of holding your intention as you ejaculate. But to be very frank, I have not done too much of that. I mean, this is like a whole different...
It really would be, it comes from the place of intention and how you're using that. If you're masturbating in order to relieve a physical, desire and just that bliss kind of sex energy, it depends, but it's probably a distraction, and probably you're losing energy in that process. That's not to be judgmental, and
no.
I don't know your situation, but generally speaking, your time could be used better.
There is no judgment. There is never... I mean, I just want to point this out. Tom and I, we have none of that stuff. We've done crazy things in our lives, both of us. And I have no freaking judgment about any kind of like thing like that. It's just we have to go through these crazy experiences, But I do want to say that there is something when you feel really aroused and the sexual energy is making you crazy, and you learn to breathe through that. And again, it takes practice to do that, and you hold that. Over time, you start to realize it's power. You're accumulating power inside of yourself. And then you find that like, oh, I don't need as much sleep. Even like you don't feel like sleeping. You just get like, but all these things happen gradually. You can experiment. But I want to say that sexual energy is creative energy. It's our power. And if we harness it and, use it correctly, we can certainly make something happen with it.
And even, systems like Qigong, they really talk a lot about retention and abstinence as a way to prolong life, these types of manifestations. So that's something to think about.
Okay, I'm just again going through things to make sure we got any questions. Okay, that's it. We're gonna post this shortly. So if you whoever wasn't able to, well, obviously, if you're here, if you're just tuning in now, you're going to be able to see the whole thing from the beginning. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and thank you for watching.
Bye.
Bye, Mr. Mumu.